Okay, so welcome to the next video of this mentorship. So today is class 9, right? And आज की वीडियो में we going to discuss make sure your higher time frame analysis is in alignment with one time frame higher. इसका क्या मतलब है? सो देखो जब हम लोग डेली टाइम फ्रेम पे लेट से एनालिस कर रहे हैं मार्केट, ओके, डेली में फेयर वैल्यू गैप मार्क कर रहे हैं फॉर एग्जांपल, सो वी मेक श्योर कि वीकली टाइम फ्रेम एक टाइम फ्रेम हायर, ओके, यहाँ पे क्या लिखा हुआ है, मेक श्योर योर हायर टाइम फ्रेम एनालिसिस इन अलाइनमेंट विथ वन टाइम फ्रेम हायर. सो इफ वी watching daily time frame, we have to make sure कि weekly is in alignment, okay. So let's me show you this illustration first. So let's say, for example, a market move from this point A to this point B, for example, okay? And let's say this is basically daily time frame, okay? Just for example purpose, okay? Let's say this is daily time frame, okay? This move was on daily. This move was on basically daily time frame, okay? And let's say here we created, for example, daily bullish fair value gap, okay. Here we created daily bullish fair value gap. When market was doing retracement, let's say market was doing retracement towards this daily fair value gap, okay, maybe sometime you will see that market didn't hold this fair value gap and we traded more lower and then bouncing back from, let's say, this price, okay. Let's say we bouncing from this price. Why this is happening, basically why this happened, okay, why price is bouncing from this level. Maybe if you go to weekly time frame, if you go to weekly time frame and you will see same price from this swing to this swing, maybe you will see weekly fair value gap here, okay. Maybe you will see weekly fair value gap here, okay. And let's say this was the daily fair value gap, okay. So if you have higher time frame fair value gap untapped, okay, there are possibility that your daily fair value gap will not hold, basically, okay. So always make sure if you're marking daily fair value gap, make sure you don't have weekly fair value gap below, okay, in this lake, for example, okay. So जब भी आप ट्रेडिंग कर रहे हो, जब भी आप हाई टाइम फ्रेम एनालिसिस कर रहे हो, तो मेक श्योर कि अगर आपका, आप यहाँ पे लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप है, ओके, लेट्स से हियर यू हैव डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप and you're looking for setup at this fair value gap, make sure on weekly time frame, one time frame higher, make sure on weekly time frame you don't have any fair value gap from price from this swing to this swing, basically, okay. I hope you guys getting me what I am trying to say, okay. Same thing applies on weekly to monthly, okay. For example, let's say price, let's see same example here, okay. So let's say price move from this swing A to this swing B, okay. And let's say here we created, for example, this is weekly time frame and we created weekly fair value gap, let's say, for example, okay. And if we have just below monthly fair value gap, let's say this is monthly fair value gap, okay, maybe this weekly fair value gap will not hold and we will come towards this monthly fair value gap. Why this happens, basically, not always it is going to happen, of course, okay, not always it is going to happen, but it's all about probability and it's all about understanding why may price can trade towards this monthly fair value gap instead of this weekly fair value gap, okay. Why it's not holding this weekly fair value gap and why it's coming towards monthly fair value gap, because the higher the time frame, the stronger that zone be, right? So if you have, let's say, weekly fair value gap here and monthly fair value gap here, this monthly fair value gap is going to act as a strong magnet, right? The higher the time frame, the stronger it will act as a magnet, basically, okay. So यहाँ पे भी same चीज, okay. So why market is retracing toward this weekly fair value gap, because डेली से बड़ा है वीकली टाइम फ्रेम, राइट? वीकली टाइम फ्रेम इज बिगर देन डेली टाइम फ्रेम, so weekly time frame will act as a strong magnet, okay. So let me show you few example so you guys can understand what I am saying. So whenever you guys going to do, and listen me carefully, okay, whenever you're going to do daily weekly analysis, okay, make sure your higher time frame is is in alignment basically. Okay, so for example, let's say price, let's say we are in bullish trend, okay, and price moved from this swing A to this swing B, and let's say first you checked weekly time frame. Okay, let's say you checked weekly time frame. On weekly we don't have fair value gap. Okay, and let's say on daily we have fair value gap here. Okay, so if you don't have fair value gap on weekly, then definitely we're going to look for setup at this daily time frame, right? So let me show you example quickly so you guys can understand. Okay, so for example, you can see we traded from this swing low and toward this swing high. Okay, and you can see we have fair value gap. Okay, you can see we have this fair value gap here. Okay, so let's mark this. Okay, we have this daily fair value gap here, and we have this daily fair value gap as well. Okay, so let's see. So why price didn't hold this daily fair value gap? You can see we traded lower toward this fair value gap. Let's check weekly time frame. Okay, let's check weekly time frame. On weekly, you can see we have this fair value gap here. Okay, weekly we have this fair value gap. Let's mark this. Okay, and if you go to daily time frame, you will see जो ये डेली में ये फेयर वैल्यू गैप हम लोग का था छोटा सा यहाँ पे, ये जो डेली में फेयर वैल्यू गैप था यहाँ पे, definitely it has given a rejection, but you can see the weekly fair value gap is acted as a strong magnet. Okay, so I hope you guys getting me what I am trying to say. Okay, so let me show you one more example. So, for example, let's see a bearish example as well. You can see we created here what bearish fair value gap, right? We created here bearish fair value gap. Okay, so हम लोग यहाँ पे डेली बेरिश फेयर वैल्यू गैप क्रिएट किए अगर वी okay let me repeat this. Okay, here we created daily fair value gap. Okay, so make sure you go one time frame higher to check क्या हम लोग वीकली टाइम फ्रेम में कहीं ऊपर फेयर वैल्यू गैप फॉर्म किए हैं कि नहीं किए ऑन वीकली टाइम फ्रेम. ओके, अगर हम लोग वीकली टाइम फ्रेम में कहीं पे ऊपर फेयर वैल्यू गैप फॉर्म किए होंगे तो मे बी इट कैन एक्ट एज अ स्ट्रॉन्ग मैग्नेट. ओके, मे बी दिस वीकली फेयर वैल्यू गैप कैन एक्ट एज अ स्ट्रॉन्ग मैग्नेट और मे बी वी नॉट गोइंग टू होल्ड डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप. ओके, सो लेट्स क्विकली check weekly time frame. On weekly you can see we created here weekly fair value gap. Okay, so नीचे हम लोग का daily fair value gap है and उसके just ऊपर यहाँ पे हम लोग का weekly fair value gap है. Okay, and this is also not a breakaway gap, so maybe we can tap this weekly bearish fair value gap, right? So let's come to daily time frame again and let's see. So you can see price tapped this weekly fair value gap and price didn't hold this daily fair value gap. So why this happens again? We just have one time frame higher draw on liquidity, stronger magnet. So that's why price uh, moved towards this weekly fair value gap, and that's why we didn't hold this daily fair value gap. Not always it's going to happen. Okay, and now listen me carefully as well. Let's illustrate first here. So let's say price move and it's same applies on the bearish side. Okay, whatever example I'm showing you on bullish side, it applies on bearish side as well. Okay, so let's say we have this price movement. Okay, let's say here we created daily fair value gap. Okay, we have this, let's say, daily fair value gap here, for example, in this price action. So let's mark, and also we have this weekly fair value gap, for example. Okay, not always it is going to reject, not always it is going to tap full weekly fair value gap. Okay, so what we're going to do in future, okay, if you're seeing, let's say, this price leg, okay, from this low to this high, you have daily fair value gap as well as weekly fair value gap. So let's say once price will tap this daily fair value gap, okay, once price will tap this daily fair value gap, okay, once we tap this daily fair value gap, if we will see some reaction on H1, H4, if you see H1, H4 bullish momentum, then definitely we're going to look for the long. Okay, definitely we're going to look for the long at this daily fair value gap. But अगर हम लोग H1, H4 में अगर हम लोग H1, H4 में यहाँ पे इस fair value gap से reaction नहीं मिलता है तो definitely maybe there's high possibility कि we going to reach toward this weekly fair value gap. Okay, so I hope you guys getting me what I am trying to say. ऐसा नहीं है कि मार्केट अगर फॉर एग्जांपल ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर मार्केट लेट से डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप में आया तो हम लोग यहाँ पे सेटअप ही नहीं देखेंगे. वी कैन लुक फॉर सेटअप एंड व्हेन वी गोइंग टू लुक फॉर सेटअप, अगर यहाँ पे H1 H4 में मार्केट यहाँ से रिएक्शन दे, मार्केट इस डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप को होल्ड कर रहा होगा, देन वी गोइंग टू लुक फॉर द सेटअप, राइट। अगर मार्केट ये लेवल होल्ड ही नहीं कर रहा है, अगर मार्केट कुछ बुलिश मोमेंटम ही नहीं दिखा रहा है, फॉर एग्जांपल यहाँ पे बुलिश मोमेंटम ही नहीं दिखा रहा है डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप से, सो व्हाई वी लुक फॉर द सेटअप, राइट। So I hope you guys getting me what I am trying to say. Okay, so let me delete this quickly. So let's see one more example. Let's say here we have marked daily fair value gap. Okay, daily bearish fair value gap. Okay, I have to make sure. Okay, if I can see here the recent daily fair value gap, daily bearish fair value gap, right? I have, let me see कि record हो रहा है कि नहीं. Okay, yeah, हो रहा है. So here we created daily bearish value gap, right? So I have to see weekly time frame as well, one time frame higher, to see कि क्या यहाँ पे weekly fair value gap कहीं पे ऊपर हम लोग का है कि नहीं है. Okay, अगर लेट्स से कहीं पे यहाँ पे weekly fair value gap है, so maybe अगर लेट्स से ये daily fair value gap अगर hold नहीं करेगा, अगर daily fair value gap से हम लोग rejection नहीं देंगे, okay, so maybe we going to tap this weekly fair value gap. Okay, so let's see weekly time frame as well. Let me delete this. Let's go to weekly. So here we have this daily fair value gap. Okay, so you can see we tap this weekly level, basically weekly fair value gap here. Okay, let's mark this. Okay, and let's come again to daily time frame. So if you see, we didn't hold this daily fair value gap and we reach towards this weekly fair value gap, right? So I hope you guys getting me what I'm trying to say. Okay. So below we have this daily fair value gap, but we didn't respected this daily fair value gap. Okay, because just above we have this weekly fair value gap. And of course, it's not going to happen all the time. Okay. So let's see one more example so you guys can understand. You can see here we tap this weekly fair value gap, weekly bullish fair value gap. Okay. सो वीकली के ऊपर क्या टाइम फ्रेम होगा, मंथली हम लोग का, ठीक है, वीकली के ऊपर हम लोग का मंथली टाइम फ्रेम होगा. सो हियर यू कैन सी वी हैव दिस वीकली बुलिश फेयर वैल्यू गैप, सो आई हैव टू मेक श्योर वी डोंट हैव मंथली फेयर वैल्यू गैप डाउन साइड. ओके, वी मेक श्योर वी डोंट हैव मंथली टाइम फ्रेम, monthly fair value gap downside. If we have monthly fair value gap at downside, maybe this weekly fair value gap will not hold and maybe we can retrace toward this monthly fair value gap. So let's see on the monthly time frame, do we have any fair value gap or not below here. Okay, so here you can see we don't have any monthly fair value gap. Okay, so when price moved from this swing low to this swing high, let's see, do we have any monthly fair value gap from this low to this high? No, we don't have, right? Of course, you can see here we have this monthly bullish fair value gap, but we already tapped this area, right? We already tapped this area and we already moving from this monthly fair value gap. But in this price level from this low to this high, we don't have any higher time frame fair value gap here, right? So I hope you guys now understand what I am saying. Okay, and again I'll say one more time. Okay, if price move, let's say from this A to B, and we have this daily fair value gap, or and maybe we have also here weekly fair value gap as well. Okay, we have this weekly fair value gap here, and we have daily fair value gap here as well. Okay, so and both are bullish fair value gap. Okay, and let's say trend is also bullish, for example here. Okay, if we tap this daily fair value gap, and once we tap this daily fair value gap and we see uh, momentum towards upside, we see some reaction from this fair value gap on H1 H4 to the upside, then definitely we can look for the long setup from this area, and maybe we will not come below at this weekly fair value gap. Okay, so don't always think we're going to retrace all the way down. Okay, sometime you will see market holding this daily fair value gap and bouncing from this fair value gap, bouncing from this daily fair value gap and not coming to this weekly fair value gap. So whenever we will mark higher time frame like daily, weekly, एंड जो भी लेवल से, चाहे अगर हम लोग को मार्केट ये डेली फेयर वैल्यू गैप से साइन शो कर रहा है, मोमेंटम शो कर रहा है कि यस दिस फेयर वैल्यू गैप इज होल्डिंग, देन वी विल लुक फॉर द सेटअप. अगर इस फेयर वैल्यू गैप को होल्ड नहीं कर रहा है मार्केट, देन मे बी मार्केट विल come towards this weekly fair value gap and then from this area we can look for the long setup. Okay, in next class we will discuss more in little depth. Okay, we will use breakaway gap. Okay, uh, in this concept. I hope अगर ये वीडियो समझ में आ जाएगा तो अच्छा है. If you guys have any problem in this video, just let me know so I can help you. Because next video will be same. Okay, almost same hoga. Okay, we going to use breakaway gap and we will understand more about in depth about this concept. So just let me know अगर यहाँ तक समझ में नहीं आएगा, so I can teach you guys again. So okay, so see you next video. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care.